I'm telling you, life's good. There's life after racing, Donny. Believe it or not, brother.
Oh, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And when that day comes, enjoy it. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my kids. I hell, I'm taking a hike, going fishing for a bike ride. I enjoy working with my father every day, and life's good, man. God willing, life is good.
Hey, gang, just wanted to give everyone a pre-show precursor as to what's going to happen here on the episode tonight. For any of you younger generation, any of you newer race fans, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the guy that goes by the name of Steve Kinser. But his cousin, Mark Kinser, was a great ambassador for the sprint car racing back in the mid-'80s, late 80s, 90s, 2000s. And even though he followed on Steve's coattails at times, Mark had a very successful career that many forget about just because of Carl, who is Mark's dad, and Steve. I'm asking you guys to tune into this show tonight. Pay attention to what Mark has to say for all of you current sprint car fans to learn a little bit about the good old days and to learn about Mark Kinser. I know the cat's out of the bag. We were trying to make it a surprise when we recorded the show, but it's been a great process of getting together with Mark, and there's some great stuff in this show, and I hope you'll all pay attention. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
Green flag in the air.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hot Lappin with Lanman, episode 8. Tonight we are going to have a really awesome show. I'm really excited about it. We're going to talk to somebody that we haven't heard from in a very long time. It's going to be pretty cool. So excited to have everybody along here. So back on my first episode, when I had Donny Schatz on, he said, hey, maybe sometime I'll come on and do some stuff with you. Well, we're going to actually, we're going to see if we can get Don in here. He's been waiting, sitting on the side, and yep, there he is. Hey, Don, welcome to have you aboard today. You're going to be sitting in not as a guest tonight, but you're going to be kind of co-hosted with me, and we haven't talked about who our guest's going to be yet. So kind of excited to tell everybody who that's going to be.
Lan, are you on your last load of laundry?
Hang on. Sorry, didn't have my headphones on.
Who wears that jersey? Who wears a jersey like that? I'm not even a football guy, but I mean, come on.
Well, there's a moral to the story here coming up here. So anyway, we had a little glitch there, but we've got a great guest coming on here too, and we're excited to talk about who that's going to be. And I was hoping maybe you would let everybody know who we're going to be talking to tonight.
The one and only Mark Kinser.
And
Mark and I go way back. A lot of today, where I've come from, I've learned a lot of things from Mark. Mark, I'd consider a good friend still to this day, even though racing has swallowed most of our lives up in a manner, and he's gotten away from it, and I've continued to allow my life to continue to be swallowed up with it. But someone I owe a great debt of gratitude to for my success and being able to travel with him and learn from him, and it's all sorts of things. And honestly, I had some of the finer moments and some of the best stories of my days traveling on the road were with him. So it's pretty cool for me. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of it, Lam.
Yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way. So you know what? All right, and we're gonna see if we can get him in here. And you know what? There he is, the one and only Mark Kinser. Mark, how's it going back there in Olytic, Indiana tonight for you?
Life is great.
He's car questing it tonight. That's lovely.
He's got Don, did you send him a care package for today, or what's going on there?
I didn't. I did not, but it looks like he'll have to get one now.
Absolutely. Mark, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. I know it's been a little bit of logistics nightmare. It hasn't been too bad really, but getting you on the show with us, it's a great honor, and it was actually Don's idea. We were talking here a couple weeks ago, and he said, let's check in with the old boy and see what he's doing today. And I got to tell you, you look exactly like the day last time I saw you at the racetrack, so you have aged very well.
Well, thank you. I can't say the same about you two guys.
Hey, the number one question, that a lot of people are wondering is you were so successful in your racing career,
Right.
and then you just, let's say, abruptly kind of just disappeared from the racing scene, and we haven't heard much from you lately. First of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing this day and age.
Well, I have a kind of what I would call a land management job. It's probably 150 acres around a very nice community here in town, and I just take care of whatever that they can't, and like the grass mowing and snow removal and stuff like that. And me and my dad have a car and motorcycle restoration business that we've been very busy on, and we've got two cars in the stalls now. That 1956 Cadillac that is a rust bucket, and it's the first car my dad has ever had to turn down. He is 86 years old. He's been a mechanic since he's 16. After 70 years, he finally had to tell one person, take it home.
So this Cadillac that's a rust bucket in there, you said it's in the stall, but does that mean it is going home pretty quick then? You guys are saying no comprende?
In the stall today. Now it's outside the stall. When it come to us, it wouldn't run. The transmission didn't work. Now it does run, and the transmission works, but the brake system, um, just everything else, the A arms underneath the front end where the shocks mount on is completely rusted out. We just can't find the parts to fix it.
Cool to know that you're staying busy. And I think you told me when I first reached out to you, the lawn mowing and the snow removal and stuff like that. You said you're willing to help out some people sometimes if they're in a jam. Do you remember the rest of that story by any chance?
I've helped so many out. You'll have to remind me.
You said you saw a guy up. I think he's sitting up on his deck somewhere. He might have been having an adult beverage, and you thought he might have needed a little bit of help with it.
Started out there. It was funny. The guys that had the big $10 stogies and a glass of martini or something would come out by his yard line, and he would say, "Hey, this is what I own. This is what you don't mess with. This and that." Had several of those, and then after a while, next thing you know, they're handing me a Ham's beer. So that's all pretty good. But the biggest thing you got to watch out for when you get into a job like that is a lady walking across the area where you're working in flip flops, and you're in trouble. You've done something wrong. I mean, she's not sharing a Hams with you or shooting the crap with you. You've definitely got into her a flower garden or something that's seriously wrong. So it was a learning curve.
Let's jump back a little bit. First of all, and I know that you and Don were really good buddies when you're out racing around there in the deal. You started in 1984. And if we look back, I'm not going to try to add up the years because it's quite a few. I think it's pretty much over 50. Let's just call it that. But, tell us just a little bit about how you got the bug to go racing. I know it's been in the Kinser family for years, but what got Mark out on the road initially racing? And if I'm correct, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong, but your dad was out racing with either Dick or Steve at the time.
Yeah, when I graduated from high school, my dad was very reluctant to let me drive a race car because in his day, you didn't start until you was 19, 20 years old until you got older enough to learn that these things could bite you. You wasn't that young, a 13, 14-year-old kid. And Jeff Gordon actually come from California to Bloomington to race. And I told my father, I said, well, they're going to let this Jeff Gordon kid race up here, and he's 13 years old. And he said, well, if they let that kid run, you can run. And so if it wasn't for Jeff Gordon, I wouldn't have got to start when I was 18.
Did you jump right into the sprint cars? Did this day and age, we've got the kids into the go-karts, the micro sprints, moving on up. And, back then it was a whole different game.
Yeah, we when I was younger, when I was probably 12 or 13, and maybe even younger, we had some go-karts, and we run about a season, maybe a season and a half around here, and it was good experience and all. But my cousin Barry, that's my Uncle Larry's boy, got his leg broke really bad in a terrible accident that shouldn't have happened. And my mom said that's the end of that. So yeah, I no prior racing before I got this sprint car helped me go anywhere.
Ran across something too, and I know that you talked about your first race car being the number 51, but I actually ran across a little article that said your first race car was actually number 11X.
Yes.
Does that ring a bell? And tell us about that.
Correct. Yeah. When I first started, the same Uncle Larry and a good friend of ours, Bud Barrett, that had been around Dad for years. There was so much stuff laying around that was a little tweak that Steve had crashed in that we just kind of threw something together and fudged it up, and it said 11 on it, so we just put an X behind.
And that was, do you remember going on and racing with that car? Any success or how that turned out?
We ran a full season around here at Putmanville and Bloomington in the 11X, and I think I'm up and painted down the front of the car brand X. And I didn't get in a whole lot of trouble. We didn't win a whole lot. We ran a couple seconds. We might have won one at Putmanville. That's been a long time ago. Maybe a trophy dash, but just enough to get enough experience that you could get on and off the track and not hurt anybody in the pit area.
You did that for a year. Eventually you hit the road, and that's something that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are not familiar with too. What got you on the road? When did you get on the road? Was it a full-time status? Was it get to races when I can? How did things like that go along?
Well, when that period started in my career was just right after what I just told you about. I ran about a season and a half, and Scott Gherkin come on the team, a Hall of Fame racing mechanic, and we went to racing, and we ran good enough until we run out of money, and then we come home and run Bloomington or wherever we could to sustain things. And to be honest with you, Scott Gherkin, being the Hall of Famer that he is, the cars were too damn fast for me. I mean, I was out of my league at the time, and I sure wish he was here today to thank him.
Absolutely, and I wish we could get this message out to more and more people that these cars are faster than some people are prepared for right now, and in this day and age. So this kind of is going to segue into this for just a second, but you learned your lesson there about the cars are too fast. So what was the fix to that to get you up to speed to be able to go out and compete on the national level?
Well, I think more experience, with just running, I guess the full season or a half that I ran at Bloomington and Putmanville would only been about 30 races. And that was non-wing. And to go out there and run wing against the All-Stars and the Outlaws is a totally different situation, So it was a big jump. Something at the time I don't think I was quite prepared for, but I got through it, got the experience, and thank God for that, because it wasn't easy.
So you're running, and you were with Scott Gherkin yet at the time then. So I suppose, was your dad and Steve still out then with Elrod? Is that who it was?
Yes, my dad, Steve, and Elrod. When I started racing, Dick Gaines had already got hurt at Champaign, and such a tragedy event. And things had changed, and Dad needed a different driver, and it came down between he was going to have his choice of Danny Smith or Steve Kinser. That was going to be the two that was going to drive his car. And from what I remember, Steve lived closer than Danny did. And that just sealed the deal for Dad. He just lives 15 miles away compared to Danny living 70 miles away. And Steve got the shot at it, and the rest is history.
And what a history that was there. But so what years were you running around here doing that, when you kind of ventured out and then had to come back home?
That was probably from 84 to around 86, 87, when we was getting missing. That's been a long time ago. I can't nail the exact dates, but it took me 3 years or so before I could solidly maintain myself enough to race either with the All-Stars or the.
Your father wasn't around much as he was out with Steve, so you were kind of on your own then?
Absolutely. Dad's car, at our race shop, we had an A stall and a B stall. And I was in the B stall. And you didn't want to even knock a boat a little bit to the left on the A stall.
That was the 11 car.
Yes. That was, you done your business in the B stall. They done their business in the A stall. You didn't mess with you didn't even touch a wrench in the A stall. If you needed a wrench and it was laying right there on the ground, you went to the toolbox on the B stall.
It's not surprising. Back then, you guys were building your own motors, and not just you guys, but there was no such thing as just make a couple phone calls and a motor's going to show up.
Oh no, we did our own motor program. A lot of our motors come from before we got things really solid at the shop. Terry Cummings and Bub Cummings from here in Bedford, Indiana. Terry Cummings Racing Engines. They still do engines today. They built a lot of motors for us up, and even when I was running the working car, when we couldn't keep up at our shop and we needed extra help, we'd come home from the road and Dad would go to Terry's shop at 1 o'clock in the morning and drop off 2 or 3 motors and say, we need them tomorrow night.
That's crazy in this day and age. And Don, how's the, this day and age, with motors, you're out there now talking a little bit about home built motors now. Even when you started, and that was, I want to say 93 or 94, were you guys building your own engines then?
No, I've never been a part of that. That's what I think today's generation does not understand, how sprint car racing evolved from, what Mark's dad did and Scott Gherkin did, where these guys built their own motors. Hell, I remember parking next to Scott Gherkin in the parking lot at a hotel, and he took the heads off a motor and put a cam in it because he felt like he needed to do something because the summer air was bad. And now, everything's store-bought, and if you call, let's just say you want to call an engine builder today and order an engine, they want the money up front. It's about $75,000, and you might wait as far as a year to a year and a half, depending on who it is and who their customers are and what they have in front of you. So that's what it's. When I started racing, I remember I felt pretty fortunate at the time. We chose to go with Earl Gertie, who had a great reputation for having a store-bought engine, and they were $25,000. And I remember my dad freaking out about how much it cost. And hell, I just told you there's $75,000 now, but I guarantee you it's not 3 times more fun. So, it's a whole different time. And but we're basically racing the same things that Carl built and Scott built and that Mark used back then. They've just been able to refine the parts and make the ignitions better and all these things to do it lighter. But it's all a prodigy of what Carl Kinser really did. So it's pretty neat to still have that.
So Mark, I wanted to, and I've been trying to put this off, but I think it's a good time to ask about it now because there's so many things that I want to ask you that we're going to relate to this. You had a great career. We're going to talk about a lot of that stuff coming up here. But in 2005, I think was your last year of racing, and what you shared with me in the phone call when I reached out to you was when you walked away and you told me it was Peevely, you drove up the hill and you never looked back.
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about that day. And I don't want to bring the negative into it because obviously you started a new chapter in your life, but the decision for Mark Kinser to just be done with racing, and it was just like, boom, cold turkey and done.
Well, we was at Peevely, a track that I normally run good at, and didn't fare that well. And I think I was driving the 35 car out of California. We'd packed the wheel full of mud, and my racing career probably ended at Fargo with a head injury I had with Tyler Walker. But I'd ran a couple years after that and just wasn't running that strong. I was close to home, and that was it. And when I walked out of Peevely, I've never been back.
So when you say you've never been back, and the reason I'm asking this now is because I'm wondering what your reaction is when Donnie says motors are 75, 80 grand these days. And I'm wondering, have you kept up with the racing scene? Is that a number that blows you away, or where does today's racing relate for you compared to 2005 when you walked away?
That is just so hard to comprehend. You know, that's a lot to take in. Um, I've heard that the motors are expensive. Everything is more expensive than it was. I've heard that the tire quality isn't as good on the cars. Like I said, haven't been to the racetrack, don't know. But I will say this: $75,000 for a racing engine is freaking ridiculous.
Thank you. And talking about tires, that's where I want to get you and Don talking, because you can compare, and Don is on today's tire compared to the tire back when, and even in the early 2000s when when you were racking up wins, Knoxville Nationals, Kings Royal races, World of Outlaw championships. Mark, Don was out there racing, so he can compare those tires to what you're on today, and talk. Tell us a little bit about some of the difference that have evolved since then.
Well, there again, I'm not at the track today, but I do know that when I was racing, the tires were pretty durable. Um, I get some outlaw races and that other new series races that comes in, the high series racing that come in on my phone every once in a while. And sure, I'll click on it and watch it. And I'll be damned if there's not one or two, maybe three cars that fall out with tire failure. And it shocks me. That was a rarity, unless the track was taking rubber, or if you're at Calistoga where there's rocks the size of a skull in the track, you know, that just didn't happen. I'm not saying we got better grip back then, but they were way more durable.
Don, can you add to that a little bit about the tire back then compared to what you're on now?
Well, I'm obviously still today. I don't ever feel good on anything we have today. I guess it's just a product of the environment. But I've been through all the stages, just like Mark has. Back then, when we all raced, you had McCreary had a tire, and Goodyear had a tire, and Hoosier wasn't even a factor in anything then. And then Hoosier built a tire and came along, and Steve ran it, and you had places where it excelled and places where it didn't. But that's what made the race and what it was when you had three different manufacturers. And you got to respect someone like Andy Hillenberg, who said, "Hey, I'm not going to pay $160 for a tire. I'm going to pay 120." So he ran McCreary's, and he had his 30% of the tracks that were good. They each kind of had a 30, 30, and 30, really. And that kind of all went out the window when it went to just one tire. But I look back, and there's people that think the sidewalls were what was sticking the tires and all these things, but I don't know that that's the case. I think we're as stuck today with the cars as we've ever been, because you can throw 1,000 horsepower at it and make it work most times. And I think Mark can tell you that didn't work back in the day. The cars were unhooked, and your car had to be right, and you couldn't really use everything. So now it's just kind of put it to the mat and wait for it to catch up or wait to hit something. And, it doesn't really suit me the greatest most days, but it's obviously we're all on the same exact thing, but I think I don't have to explain this to you, Len, when you put everybody on the same thing and someone's a whole lot better than someone else. Normally there's something outside the box that changes that. And I kind of miss that, but I get the business side of it. I mean, Hoosiers come to the table and they pay a lot of the point fund, and they're a huge supporter of dirt track racing. And, they're an Indiana company that's been around a long time. So, it is what it is. There's not a lot of competition. Pricing's kind of gotten crazy. In fact, heck, I just seen a post the other day of a guy that said that you can, if we had a different brand of tire, you'd save local racers about $70 a tire on just a right rear alone. So, it's give or take, but they also give a lot back. So it is what it is. But Mark's right. Back in the day, you didn't have a lot of these things, and I think a lot of it today when you see tire issues, there's a lot more things maybe outside than the tire. I mean, we're racing with other types of cars that have parts fall off them and sheet metal and things get stuck in the track and probably cut a lot of tires. But you could wheel spin causes a lot of tires. I mean, I've seen this. I'm looking back to the Nationals the year we started on the pole, and I ran into one with the left rear off the wheel because we didn't have any bead locks on it, and it's strictly I had spun the wheel on or I spun the tire on the wheel and it just came right off. So you can have maximum grip and then spin the wheels and then get the grip again, and it'll tear the tire right off the wheel. That's just how much power we have. So it's kind of hard to relate old to new, but it's the reality of what's there.
Since we're talking about the old days versus today, Mark, back when you were, really in your stride with the Outlaw deal, and maybe even a little bit before that, talk about the haulers that you guys had back then, and all the spare cars and spare motors you had on board.
Well, when I very first started racing, we had it was an open wheel with me and Durkin, open wheel truck and trailer. We had one spare motor, two front axles, two nose wings, and I think two left rears, two right rears, and two fronts, and that was it.
And that was pretty much standard operating procedure for a lot of the teams out there, if I'm correct.
Absolutely. And the air conditioner in the truck sucked. Yeah.
So you evolved with the racing, because I'm going to say your era was probably some of the most drastic changes, because I want to say by the time you got out, the big haulers were in place, the spare cars up top were probably just starting to come around a little bit, multiple motors under the cabinets, things along those lines. And tell me if I'm wrong, but that transition from the good old boys to where the almost corporate started, was that good or bad for sprint car racing?
Well, I tell you, when, like I said, back with the open hauler, and, you'd go through Texas and you'd stop at a truck stop and get you a honey bun or something like that from the convenience store, and you'd just lay it right there on the floor, and about 100 miles, it'd be nice and hot.
Yeah.
Your feet would be on the dash. Your head would be hanging out the window because it was so damn hot. But that honey bun was so delicious when you finally did it. And, but there again, and a lot of times we went without a motel room.
Sleep in the truck?
And when times that we did get one, me and Elrod might be sleeping in one bed, and Dad and Steve might be sleeping in the other. Whoever was lucky enough to draw the odd straw would still be sleeping in a truck alone.
In your career, you started out, and then you got rolling really good with the Outlaws. And I want to just talk a little bit about some of the cars, some of the iconic cars that you drove. We've already talked about the 11X, which I don't remember, and I'm pretty sure Don probably doesn't remember.
It was about a 30 race deal before I tore it up.
Yeah, but then you brought out the 51, and tell us why, because that was pretty much the Mark Kinser number for the longest time.
Right. I've always been a fan of AJ Foyt. I guess everybody, including all three of us here today.
Yep.
I seen a picture of him at Daytona in a red stock car with a white 51 on it, and I just thought that was beautiful. And it stuck with me. And when I tore up all the stuff that already had 11 on it at the shop, and Dad said, well, you get your own number. What do you want to pick? And I said, well, 51. And he was going, why in the hell would you pick 51? It's number on it, Dad. And I said, well, if you put me on the track with 100 cars, I think I could beat 51. That's a terrible number. And he let me roll with it. And it was a white car with a red number for a while, 51. If it wasn't for AJ Foyt, I'd have probably run 11X forever. But I just had to show my shine.
I think from there, and you're going to have to help me because I'm trying to remember. This was when I was probably just a teenager, and I was just really, but I was infatuated with the sprint cars, the World of Outlaws, and all that stuff. But the Reed's Diesel 6R. Tell a little bit about that ride, because I think you were in that for a couple of years, and that's where I first remember you, kind of breaking out.
Yeah, Reed, what a great guy. He had a diesel business there in the right there down there by Baylands. Done really good for himself. Reed Diesel, Jim Reed, what a great guy. He had some money, and I was driving the 51 car, and he approached me. And actually, at the time, him and Ray and Jay Williams were kind of buddies on a car there, that the Payless robbery car there around California. And he approached me and said he would like to for me to drive his car. And I said, well, we'll just see what we can work something out. And in the end, he gave me his truck and trailer. He paid my help, 2 helpers. He bought the motel rooms and give me $40,000. And that's back in 80 something. And I thought I was on a rocket to heaven. This is the sponsor. This is the sponsorship that just fell in my lap.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe that happened to me. And we ran a couple years and run pretty good. We won Manzanita and a couple big races, and I think we run third in the points and did pretty good for ourselves. And after a couple of years, he had his fun. He had spent his money, and we split as good friends.
So from there, is that when you did you go back to the 51, or is that when Chuck Merrill came along?
I believe I went to the 51 for a while, kind of just to race, and then I went to race actually for Ray and Jay Williams, the ones that he was already buddies with the orange car.
The orange, and that was the 5M car for you too, then, right? The Payless car,
The chassis 5M car.
Yep.
And, the Williams brothers pretty well financed that deal. So life was good, and we ran, I think, second in the World Outlaw points or third, and won our share of races. But still, Stanley and Steve and Doug Wolfgang at that time was so hard to beat. The competition was just fierce. But once you got the top 5 and that mid 80s to early 90s area, man, you're going to have to really pull up your skirt to pass the next guy.
And that is so true. So talk to me a little bit about a guy named Ted Johnson and the importance of him in your racing career.
Well, with Steve and Dad winning so much and everything, I've got the world of respect for Ted Johnson. I truly do. But the only driver that ever got docked points for racing the night the Outlaw race was me. That's about all I can say about that. And I did
Really?
a sprint car race. I went and run a crappy stock car or a truck at a NASCAR race that couldn't even get out of the pit area. And when I come back to run the Outlaws, he already docked me 150 points. I wasn't running against him, but I will say this about Ted Johnson: he built something from nothing that's still here today. That's got competition reaming right up their bunghole, and I think they'll make it if they stick to the same way. But and I don't know a whole lot about both sides. Donny probably does, but they've got competition again. But I think they'll prevail.
Speaking of competition, I think it was 1989. The USA came out.
Yes.
And you and your dad and Steve and Sammy hitched your wagons, to that deal. And tell me some of the things. And for people who don't know, the USA was a sanctioning body that was, I don't remember who created it, but it was an attempt to go against and compete directly against the World of Outlaws. Obviously, somebody was probably upset with Ted, or there was grumbling. I don't remember what it was about. But for a year there, everybody split. Or not everybody, but it was kind of like where we're at today. We went down this road 100 times. The Outlaws always win. I'm not saying that's going to happen in this case, but the Outlaws is a proven brand. And so I'm interested to know why you guys chose to go with the USA that year.
Well, I don't know the facts of what's going on today, but then it just seemed like the things just weren't fair. Ted was getting, I think, $25,000 a race, and the winner wasn't getting, I think, $7,000, $8,000 a race. Don't hold me to that, but we just thought there was a better way for the race car driver, the race car owner, first and foremost, to keep on keeping on. Because if you don't have the race car owner, you don't have a race car. You know, that's back in the day where there was a lot of race car owners that they just needed somebody that was carrying a helmet. They
Yeah.
didn't need some kid that had a helmet bag full of money.
Yeah.
Which from what and maybe happening today. Back then, it was your talent that put that guy into that race car. If that race car was a top-notch race car, he was happy to be there. And that was getting phased out. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the USA took off. And I put my heart and soul into that USA racing series. I ran really good at it. Matter of fact, I had pneumonia or something come up, or I would have won the points championship that year. Sammy ended up winning it, and at the end of the year, it come around. Well, does everybody want their points checked for the season? And at that time, I was kind of half-assed car owner, car driver, because it was me and Scott Durkin, and Dad had the A team. And I think it paid whatever 60,000 or probably less than that per second. And I said, well, yeah, we want that money.
Well, yeah.
And Steve and Sammy had already kicked theirs back in for the next season and said, we'll try it another year. And I didn't. And then the next thing you know, I'm the reason why they didn't go another year. Well, I'll be damned if they didn't need that $60,000 to go another year.
Yeah.
It was just the end of it, and I kind of got the tail end of that. But we was just looking for a change, and it didn't happen.
1994 rolls along, and I guess what I want to talk about is new people come into the fold of the World of Outlaws. It can be intimidating as a driver, even as a mechanic. That's your first year out with these guys, because everybody takes care of everybody on that outlaw deal. No matter what happened on the racetrack, everybody gets along. And this kid comes rolling in from Fargo, North Dakota. Donny Schatz got this number 15 car. And tell me your initial thoughts on Don as a race car driver.
Well, I can tell you for real, Donny from the day I met him was very well managed, very well. I don't know how to put my finger on it. He didn't badmouth nobody. He didn't run into nobody. He was just kind of picking and choosing his way. And I used to go to Houston's sometimes for that Gold Cup or whatever they would call it.
Yep.
I had seen Donny run, and I was so impressed with Donny that they run one race a year at Houston on the Outlaws series when I was running. And the night before the Outlaw race was a local race for anybody that wanted to tune up or check their parts out, or maybe they hadn't been there to kind of tune up. And at that time, my wife, Cindy, when we were in Houston, it was a great stop for the ladies because there was a mall right there that you could park a motorhome in, or even a big rig today, let the ladies have, their time, this, that, and the other. And Cindy said, well, what are we going to do tonight? We going to the Steak and Ale and to the mall? And I said, no, we're going to the Houston to watch Donny Schatz run. Yes. And she thought I was teasing. And got on the highway and went the wrong way. Wasn't going toward the mall, Applebee's or whatever. She throwed an orange and an apple at me when I was driving a motorhome. I don't know. But we got there, and she went her own way up toward the stands reluctantly. And at that time, we didn't have any kids, and I went into the pit area. And after the races was over, I think they drove pills that night. I don't think they qualified. And Donnie got a bad starting spot in his heat, and he got through his heat, and he was about mid pack in the feature, and was coming up through the field, balls to the wall, and it took her up. And there he sat in third place. And there again, I was so impressed. He was just waiting for number 2 to make a mistake so he could take P2. Number 2 didn't make that mistake. He ran third. And after this, here comes Cindy down from the grandstands, and of course the promoter had noticed her and whatever, and they got her up into the VIP stands. She was about that slobbered, and she said, "Yeah, that Donny Schatz is going to be pretty good."
Oh, that hey, did you ever play the drums? Because I think I remember they used to have a big gala event at Huset's, out at the Ramcota Inn out there, and they'd always have a band up there. And I want to say in '94, I think it was you and Barry Hill and somebody else actually covered some song, and you were actually pretty good on the old Skins.
When I was younger, we had a band. We played a couple high school proms, stuff like that, and had a good time with. But yeah, Barry Hill played a Led Zeppelin song, and that's pretty hard to hit. Been a long time. That was the song, been a long time, been a long time. And yeah, I think we actually got lucky there.
Yeah, I just remember I was impressed with it there on the old bongos there, and you actually looked like you knew what you were doing. And I mean to get off the subject there, but that just popped in my head for some reason. So you get going up and down the road here, and back then I think you had a few traveling partners, and Don was just getting started and out in his motorhome too a little bit, going up and down the road. And I think Mark, you were in the 5M then, I think the Merrill 5M, but I'm not sure. Don, maybe you can remember too, but traveling motorhomes up and down the road together, probably a lot of fun happens.
We when I had being my wife, we so blessed. Cole, my boy Cole Kinser, come into our life, Carl Cole Kinser, and I was going to be damned if I was going to raise him in a Shoney's parking lot or a Holiday Inn parking lot. That wasn't going to happen, and we got to finding out there's like KOAs, places where you could take a campground. And we would try to find places with where there was fishing involved, or of course a swimming pool, or something where he could maybe ride a bike and whatever. So we got away from the racing there for maybe 24 to 48 hours. And I had met Donnie, and we kind of towed into some places and done some fishing. And I've actually got a bobblehead that still today that Donnie had given my boy, like his great godfather, Donny Schatz. And, and there again, Donnie, he doesn't do anything half-assed, never has. And I was talking one day, well, I think I'm going to go to Walmart and get Cole a bicycle, something with some training wheels. And get him going, if he scratches his knee or busted his lip, that's going to be okay. And Donnie said, well, yeah, you might want to do that. And the next day, Donnie already bought a brand new Trek mountain bike. Walmart. Hell no. Walmart. I got the bicycle at the shop. Like I said, he doesn't do anything halfway. If my boy would actually have already learned how to ride a bicycle, he could have went to the nearest BMX bike track and lapped the field. I mean, this thing was nice. Way too nice for a kid that didn't even know how to ride a bicycle.
Yeah, but you still have it. So,
I have it.
It's probably worth more now than what it was then.
That's for sure. Yeah. Oh, Donnie, I tell you.
Oh, that's funny. So you guys roll up and down the road together, and you probably get to know each other real well too that way. So talk about times when you would race against each other. You're traveling together, but Was there ever any like elbows, or right rears that might have got just a little bit wide here or there, or any incidents on the
Well,
racetrack that were ever
oh,
needed to be discussed?
I'm going first on this one. So, Mark helped me tremendously. Obviously, during that time, Mark was winning all the races, and I was dreaming about winning races. But at the end of the night, when Mark took the helmet off and we went back to the motorhome, or he went back to the motorhome, or we were on to the next place, I was still in confusion as to what happened and what I needed to do to be better. And Mark was already done and gone and on the way. But I'll never forget the night at Eldora, straight up. And I don't ever consider myself being, out of control. Well, I was out of control when I was real young, but at Eldora one night, Mark was probably going to win the King's Royal, and in the heat race or something in there, I guess I come up the racetrack, and he was there, and I knocked his front end out, and I kept going, and believe me, I felt like hell. And I remember telling him, and I'll never forget your words. And to this day, I still race the same way. He's like, well, hell, Donnie, you didn't know I was there. When you got half a car in front of someone and you don't know they're there, it's your real estate. You own it. So, and obviously times have changed. And so I always, to this day, after that incident, still expect someone to be there. So you try to make sure you're clear, or not go that way. But obviously you see how things are in today's environment. But he could have easily, I wrecked your weekend. I literally did. It was my change lanes at the last second. Didn't think someone was there, but you were there. And you were going to win the race. So I just cost you at the time. It would have been 50 grand, and you weren't one bit upset. It was a learning experience for me, and those sort of interactions and have groomed me to what I am today. We don't have those things today with today's environment. Like if I try to tell a kid that today, that's how it works, they look at me like, what planet are you from? Like there's something wrong with you. And it's just the way it goes. So I don't ever remember, Mark was never a racer that fed you a right rear or used you up. He's taught me more patience than anything. You'd get around someone, or you knew damn well if you got to Steve Kinser and he seen what color your car was on one side or the other, you were never going to get that opportunity again. So you had to make sure if you were going to get him, it was, all at once, not show him. And unless you were trying to get him to change lanes, then it was a different story. But Mark was super patient, and it won him a ton of races. And I guess I stood back trying to be impatient, but learned the patience. It just took a hell of a long time. So, but I don't ever recall us having anything other than that one time, maybe at Eldora. Do you?
No, I don't. That's a good story there, Obi-Wan Kenobi. One time at Manzanita, and I was running pretty good, hot and heavy, winning the race. White flag comes out, and this lap car comes all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. Donny Schatz mucked my ass for the checker.
Well, so whoever,
Or not.
yeah, so you remember that to this day?
Oh yeah, Manzanita's a big race, and we got out there, and I knew somebody had to be pretty close to me, and Donnie been running pretty good. I didn't know who it was, but I didn't know it was Donnie, and kind of got trapped by the lap car, and Donnie just snookered me. One race.
That was a confidence builder for me, because you beat, when you're in that transition period from not knowing where you're at, trying to be something, and you end up making it a last lap pass on someone like Mark, who's winning all the championships and winning all the races. It definitely puts a little air in your ego, I can tell you that. I think it might have, we still had a few beers after that, though, if I remember right.
He was like I said, a good race car driver, and he was looking out farther down the track than his hood ornament, and he could tell that lap car had pinned me. He just went to the lane where I wasn't and just blew by me. And I just knew when I got to the pit area, Carl Kinser was going to be a foot up my ass. When I got there, Dad said, "You know what? that lap car pin you down, you could either, I'm happy with second. I think that's the only time in my career that my dad said that, because it was either wear that lap car out and our stuff out or run second.
It's funny you remember that too, because it's probably the only time. So that's more than likely the reason you remember it, huh, Mark? So speaking of, Don said you won a bunch of World of Outlaw races. Mark, you're still fourth overall in World of Outlaw wins at 203. And the guy right in front of you is Donny Schatz at 316. I did, just for a little fun, I did the averages because Don's got a few more years on you, Mark, so he might have a few more wins. But the averages are like within a half of win a year difference. So, it was a great era back then too. So, Mark, something I wanted to ask you about was Steve and Carl were very, very dominant for many years. And not just you. Anybody in a sprint car played second, third, or fourth fiddle to those guys a lot of the time. And if it wasn't him, it was probably Sammy or Doug. But Steve took a hiatus and did what everybody would probably do if given the opportunity. He went to NASCAR. And that kind of left Carl with a lot of free time on his hands. And you guys were able to transition into a father-son team. And I'm wondering, what was it like when you realized you were going to get to race with your dad instead of kind of against your dad? And how did that go? And was it exciting? Was it pressure? How was that?
Well, I tell you, when Steve went to NASCAR and things wasn't doing very good or wasn't going very good, and I'll say this for on Steve's end, he was running for Kenny Bernstein, and I think Kenny Bernstein, well, I pretty well know, when they were practicing, when they were kind of when the camera was there, would put Steve out there. It's my opinion, in a car that had probably a cheater motor in it. Steve was hot lapping. He was right up toward the front, come down here and picture and blah, blah, blah. And just as soon as it all fell through, Kenny Bernstein was selling everything. He wanted to sell out. So, it made Steve look good for a second. But when they would put race trim on and go out to qualify, Steve would just be barely in the field. But man, when they were hot lapping and that week up for practice or whatever before the race, Steve was right up front, and he kind of got mowed over there by Kenny Bernstein. I think Steve did, and then it wasn't working out. And Steve was coming back home, and I told Dad, I said, I can move my car back into the beach stall. Steve's coming back. Why race against him? Let's race with him. And Dad said, we've been running pretty good, and I'm kind of getting tired of a two-car team. We got half the crew. We only got one rig on the road. I'm happy with the way you're driving. You're my driver. And, man, I didn't think that was the right decision at all. And Scott Gerken was working for us at the time at the shop. That's when we were 100% building our own motor. Scott was totally over that program. And I told Dad, I said, well, if Steve comes back and he don't race for us, him and Gerken are like best friends. Gerken's going to go with Steve. And Dad said, I don't think that'll happen. I said, I guarantee it's going to happen. And it did. And it hurt my dad's feelings. And Scott went with Steve, and we stayed a one-car team. And kind of the rest is history. Dad and Steve had a little bit of a rocky road after that. A lot of people made more out of it than what it was. I know my dad, and maybe Steve was the same way. He, like I said, he had his feelings hurt. He may mofo this guy or mofo that guy, mofo Steve. But if somebody comes to the shop and mofo Steve, that kicked their ass right out the shop.
Yeah.
He could say something bad about Steve, but by God, nobody else could. Because that in the end, they still had a love and prayer for one another. Just there was some feelings hurt.
I just want to make sure I have this straight. You and Gerken started racing together. Steve and Gerken ended racing together.
Yes. Gherkin started working with me. Like I said, I was way young, way inexperienced. The cars were way too fast. I remember one time we just passed Doug Wolfgang at Devil's Bowl, I think an all-star race or whatever, coming for the checkered, and I got the marbles and turned over down the front straightaway. And I thought I actually made it to the flag stand. Well, I just needed about another half a flip. And Wolfgang won, and Scott Gherkin, we got into there, and he said, well, everything's tore up. And I said, well, at least we won $7,000. He said, we got last place. And Shelby went out there to the track, showed me the last place where my roll cage had dug into the track, and sure enough, it was about 4 feet, dead last. So, there's time that Gherkin worked with me, and he was great, but he ended his career with Steve and in racing. And then he went on to build motors with the boys down in Washington, Indiana. I can't remember their name right now. It'll come to me. Jones, yes. Yeah, they built our motors for a while, too. Jeff and his dad, Jones. Yep.
One thing I was going to ask real quick, that initial time, because Steve came back in the middle of the year, of all things, too. Like right before the Kings Royal and the Knoxville Nationals. So it was like money time. And was there tension in the pits, or could you guys, run down the road together, or was it just kind of I'll be down here and you'll be down there?
At the racetrack there was never no pressure or intensity between teams. And another thing I should say too about my dad getting his feelings hurt when Steve had come back to sprint car racing. I gave him a bunch of heads. Good quality heads, pistons, and stuff, because you just don't, like Donny said, you just don't go out and buy that stuff. Especially mid-season, you don't go to a motor builder and say, "Hey, Gertie, I need 3 motors. We're going to start a championship team out mid-season." That don't happen. So Dad really helped Steve get his career back going when he come from NASCAR, and with Scott going with Steve, I think that was just a double whammy. It hurt his feelings pissed him off.
Yep. Now, were you running the Mopar car that year? Do you happen to remember the 5M Mopar?
No, I was still running the working car when Steve had come back.
Okay. The Mopar was yet to come.
Yes.
Okay. Because I want to talk about those Mopar years. And I just don't know what other word there is, but just dominance. You guys had something figured out with the Mopars, and it was an exciting time in racing because everybody had been on the Chevys, and all of a sudden, and Casey Luna had the Ford going, but the Dodge deal coming out there was quite a few guys that really switched over to the Mopars because of what you and your dad did.
The Mopars was a good drivable motor. Had that the K10 or KY motor, I believe it was, a block, very strong block, shorter push rods, pretty much indestructible. I don't think we ever blew one up. Of course, racing engines are just like humans. You can build 2 exactly the same, but one will outrun the other.
Yeah.
And there he was with good equipment, car-wise. We had good mechanics. We had everything ready to go. And here we've got a major sponsor with Mopar bringing their motor package and some money as well. Life has never been better at that time.
I want to jump back to, I think it was 2001. You guys had a heck of a point lead going into, I think it was Talladega, Alabama, the short track at Talladega. And you pretty much needed to just kind of ride around a little bit and finish a couple of races, and you guys had that deal wrapped up. And you had a little incident, I think, during the feature. Talk a little bit about that and the ensuing results the next couple of weeks as you fought for that championship.
Well, it's there at Talladega, and it is a short track, and it's slick. Donnie can tell you, and things didn't go our way, and the rest of the season, it really changed the complexity of the rest of the season. I mean, it just really changed how things were going to work out.
So you got into an accident there, and I think, and that's why, jumping back to our earlier conversation, was you had a primary car and then a backup car. And I think you ruined the car It was a pretty bad accident. I think he went over the top of 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, I think, and twisted the car up pretty good. So, how important was a primary car versus a backup car back then? And we're talking 2001, so it's not, in my mind, it's not that long ago, but for the younger listeners, it is a long time ago. But to have a primary car versus a backup car.
Well, with our primary car, our backup car, even our third car that would be waiting at the shop, they're winning cars. They're the best of the best of the best. I was sponsored, and my dad with Chuck Burrell from Maxim. If he had a new part, a new lighter part, a better part, we were the first team to get our hands on. That's one thing that was a big plus for my racing career, was being involved with Chuck and running his 5M number, because it wasn't so much experimental. It was, we got it first. And with the crew I had, including my father, of course, we knew right off the bat if it was an advantage or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So our primary car, our secondary car, our thirdary car, it didn't matter.
I remember it was one of the closest World of Outlaw point chases that we ever had that year. And you and was it Danny? Yeah, Danny Lastowski. You guys pretty much slugged it out right till that final checkered flag, and I think you ended in Vegas that year.
Yes. Yep.
I know that you were a 2-time World of Outlaw point champion, 99 and 96. I think you guys had one year where I think you knocked off, I want to say 27 wins or something like that. Just trying to think about, what was that like to have a season like that, and to just know where, and this is where you two can compare a little bit, because Don's the last one I think to have a 20+ race win season, unless it's happened in the last couple of years where I'm not keeping track of the stats. But you go to the track and you don't expect to win, but your confidence is probably like way up here.
Yeah, we had a season like that. I don't know if that was that year or not, but one year, I can't remember which year it was, but we had 42 fast times, 22 new track records in 1 year. And I think at that time if you was in the first heat, you started sixth and you had to run fourth to make the A main. And I think we won like 48 heat races. So if you're running that good, the features are going to fall in, or you're stepping on something later in the night.
Yeah. And that was I'm looking back at my notes now. That was 1996. So your first championship too, where it was domination, 400-point win with the Outlaws.
Crazy fun.
Yeah. So I just, we talked a little bit about it, but we weren't really spot on about it to an extent. But when you left the races at Peavey, have you been to another sprint car race since you left? Have you ever even gone to another race?
No, I've shied away from the races quite a bit. One time here a couple years ago, Dad was wanting to go see Rico at Lawrenceburg, because Rico was, and it was cold weather, and probably wasn't even going to get the race in. I said, Dad, I haven't been to a race for 4 or 5 years or longer. Why on earth would I go to a race in Lawrenceburg when the weather's going to be bad? And he's going, well, Rico, the station's going to be there, and blah, blah. Well, I didn't go, and Dad ended up going with my uncle, and the weather was really bad, and Rico didn't show up.
Oh, boy.
To this day, my dad calls Rico George Jones. No show.
Does he? To this day?
Here. Funny quick story about Rico. He said, well, next time I come down here, I'm going to bring a couple of world-class wines for you, Carl. And I said, don't waste it. He'd rather drink a glass of Kindle oil. Glass wine for Carl Kinser? No way in hell. And, but he ended up bringing it, and I ended up with it. And I'll have to say one thing about that Abreu Farms. They know their wine. It was the best I've ever had.
That's so. At least he showed up for that one then.
Yeah. No show showed up at the shop with a couple bottles of wine, and I took them home.
Mark, you you also told me you shared some stuff about family, and that was the main reason that was one of the main reasons you decided to when you went up the hill there in Peeville, you decided to head east, or whichever direction is over there to Olytic, and never looked back. And talk about the importance of family for you today. And then the other thing that I'm curious about is, do your kids even know that you are a race car driver? I'm sure they do, but to what extent are they aware of that?
Well, my boy, he's very aware of it. He grew up, like I said, Donnie bought him a bicycle,
Yeah.
and more than that, Donnie was a very good to Cole. They were really good friends, really good buddies, and uh, like I said, I feel that Donnie should be a kind of a godfather to Cole. They were very close. Donnie was so good with him. My daughter, on the second hand, she never got to see me race. She has no clue about what it takes to do it, or anything. Still, sometimes, I live in a small community, and maybe somebody asked her, well, you're Kinser, is Mark or Carl, and so she kind of gets that, knows that people's got a awareness of the name, but she's got no interest in it. Matter of fact, some collectors that's been coming by the shop and stuff, I've been selling off some bits and pieces of stuff that I've collected through the years with trophies and suits and stuff like that, because the kids just don't have no interest in it.
Well, I think what we should probably do is just have, like, like King's Royal Week or something, just have Don, since he's flying right by your place, just stop by and pick you guys up and take you out to Eldora for a weekend.
You know what? I think I got this hat one time when Don stopped by and took me to Costa Rica.
That sounds like a better option yet. Huh? Don, you got anything for that?
I've never been to Costa Rica, but it sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. I was there in Costa Rica, and I seen that hat and suitcase. I just nabbed the damn thing.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask both you guys too. Both of your fathers were very influential in not just your racing career, but your existence and your life. Talk about the importance of having someone like that in your corner, no matter what happened. Anytime you either checked into a racetrack or were going to get your driver's license.
Well, I'll go first here. I know my father. A broken watch is right twice a day, but I might be right twice a month. So I don't know how broken that is. I mean, the guy is so right about everything, and I still find myself putting my foot in the door, and he is just, at 86, 87 years old, he's not out of touch. He is right with the world that's spinning with us, and he has meant everything to me and my family, and I'm so lucky to have a father like that. And I've seen, at sometimes me and my father are very good friends, and sometimes we're very good enemies. I think that kind of reflects maybe what Donnie's relationship with his father.
Yeah, it's I can say it secondhand, Land. I when I hung out with Mark, and there's a lot of those nights when we got back to the motorhome, and the problem was at that point, what beer are we drinking, or are we drinking whiskey tonight, or what we're drinking. Mark never really ever said much about, the car being bad or someone running him over or someone using him up, but damn it, he get mad at Carl at times. But he knew how to, and my dad was the same way. They knew how to motivate you. You know what I mean? They're your dad, so they know you more than anyone. And I think more than anything, it's just that's the motivation for you. And my dad was that way. Hell, Mark, you knew my dad. You knew how he was. There was probably a lot of those. I remember those mornings when we were in Carlisle at the Econo Lodge, and our motorhomes were parked next door, and you were mad because my dad was beating on my door at 6 a.m. to get me up to go running because I couldn't hang on to the wheel when I was waking you up. It's just how it is. And you wouldn't trade it for the world, but I think Mark says it best when he says, your father's your father, but yet he's your best friend, but yet then he's also probably your worst enemy at the same time. So it is what it is. I'm fortunate to have had that. Without the push, the motivation that I had from him, I probably wouldn't be sitting here on this having this conversation with you guys. And I got to see it firsthand with Mark and Carl. I was never real close with Carl. I mean, to this day, Carl's still that guy that you always wanted to really know, but never really knew. You were just super intimidated about him because he opened Open Wheel magazine and it's all Carl Kinser. It's all Carl Kinser. And he still holds that weight to me. It's kind of a shame that, today's generation don't get to see how sprint car racing really was. It was really simpler. It was way simpler than what it was. But then again, we have the proteges of Carl Kinser. We got Rick Warner, no question, the closest thing to him there is, straight up. And he was one of Carl's proteges, and we all know how it came about. It was from him painting Kinser Racing on the side of that trailer out in Carlisle in the hotel parking lot. So, it's kind of cool to see, but yeah, it's the family aspect is pretty magical.
Well, and you say the proteges of Carl too, and I had jotted down a few names here because Mark did have an all-star team the year that they smoked everybody too. Justin Adams. I know Justin started with you guys, and Justin went off and worked for the Canes for quite a while and was very successful. Dennis Kohler, Dink, the wild man. But you know what? Dink went on the road with Jack, and they won a lot of races there for a while in the Pennzoil car. He went back home, and they won a lot of races too. And I think Carl was always just a phone call away for Dink. And then both Cale Kane and who's the other one? I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank here.
Casey, Cale Kane and Willie.
Yes, thank you, Willie. Willie and both of them spent time with you guys there. So you look at some of the, protege is a good word, but it's almost like the feeder system, in the NFL, the coaches, they go that way, and the knowledge that Carl had and probably still has to this day was shared with so many. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, I was very blessed in my racing career because I think a lot of young mechanics and even middle-aged mechanics who thought that they could learn something from the king come to work for me. I had Jamie Adrian from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, worked with me for years, was my right-hand man. I had Russ, when I first started out, would fill in a little bit. Bobby Kraft was a good wrench. Slim Jim worked with me for a while. Chris Strait out of Pennsylvania. And I had great success with all those guys. But there again, we had the shadow of Carl Kinser looking over us. And speaking of a father and son.
Not to catch anyone off guard here, this is a post-show edit. Mark Kinser actually called me the following day and asked if I could get something in the show that he had forgotten about. And we were talking about some of the mechanics that had worked for Mark in the past. He wanted to be sure and mention Jimmy Jones. He wanted to tell everybody that Jimmy Jones was like his brother. Jimmy bailed him out many times. He worked for him, but not bailed him out of jail, but bailed him out of situations. Sometimes one time he was broke down on the road, and Jimmy was working for another team and said, listen, I got to go help my brother Mark out. And Jimmy was always there for Mark, and he just wanted to make sure he expressed his gratitude and how much Jimmy Jones meant to him also. Back to our regularly scheduled program.
Relationship, I seen a picture of Donny Schatz at Fargo on the front straightaway, and it looked crystal clear, just like Donny. I don't know if either one of you guys have seen that picture. It looks like he won the trophy dash or the feature or something. The whole stand, the whole everything just was phenomenal.
He used to tell people when it didn't run good that I was the mailman's kid, so I don't know how that could be. So.
Mark, I've noticed a lot over the last couple of years too, and I've never shared this with Don, but he looks more and more like his dad every day, and physical traits you can't control.
There's a reason I don't shave, Landon, because my dad was always clean shaven. Let's just be clear.
That but also the way people conduct themselves too, and like Mark, just sitting here visiting with you, I can just see the laughter and the joy that Carl always had too, and I can tell, I don't have to ask the question. You're genuinely a happy person this day and age.
I'm telling you, life's good. There's life after racing, Donny. Believe it or not, brother.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. When that day comes, enjoy it. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my kids. I hell, I'm taking a hike, going fishing for a bike ride. I enjoy working with my father every day, and life's good, man. God willing, life is good.
I saw your dad. Well, you know this, but last time I was down your way, I don't know, I was down there for a funeral or something down that way, and I was like driving by I remember the exit to your house and the shop. You get off the highway right there, south of Bloomington, and the shop's right there. And so I went up to your house and knocked on the door, and no one was there. And, anyway, I was like, well, it's worth a try, So I went back down to your dad's place, and I thought it was, I don't know, fairly early in the day, 4:30, 5 o'clock or something. So I knock on the door, and, it's right at about dark. It's getting there, and I knocked on the door, and your dad answered the door, and he was right in the middle of dinner. So he was chewing, and I'm like, oh boy. And he looked at me, and he didn't recognize me. So I just said, hey, just a local racer from up here at Bloomington. I'm having a little trouble. My car, I can't get my car stuck in the slick. Can you help me out? And he's like, well, I don't do no racing no more, and I'm in the middle of dinner. And he stuck his head out, and he goes, well, hot damn. He figured out who it was. He said, you gained 30 pounds since the last time I seen you. So, and he's right. But anyway, him and your mom were having dinner, and I just said, Carl, I just wanted to razz you a little bit and go about your dinner. I never know when you're in town, you got to stop. So I was there, and so made the best of it. But I mean, then I think that's when you and I got your number and called, and you were down taking your daughter to college down at Evansville, or touring colleges, I think it was. So still pretty cool to go and see the old stomping grounds there, where you worked on the cars. And I mean, nowadays everybody's got to have big old fancy shops, and you guys did it just out of a little shop by your house, and nothing's changed. So it's pretty cool to see that history and at least acknowledge it.
It was funny when Briscoe son Chase went to NASCAR, and they was thinking about getting maybe a Ford midget car or a Ford sprint car, and you know the history of that. But it's when it very first started out, and they had brought some Ford executives down to the shop, and was if Dad would be interested in being part of their program. And of course, Dad had already told me I'm done racing. But anyway, they showed up, and this younger boy that was with them, wearing a suit and everything, he turned around, looked at Dad, and standing at the garage, said, "Well, where's your race shop?" Dad said, "You're standing there." And that kid just laughed. He just laughed out loud. He said, "No, really, where's your race shop?" Dad said, "You're standing there," because he always seen these ones with the glass floors, and and he just couldn't believe that he was standing in the race shop. He just thought this was a place where we worked on pickup trucks or something,
Yeah.
So it really dawned on me really quick, how industrialized or how sponsorship a lot of the shops that they've seen. It's nothing but somebody's floors. Hell, we never sweep the floor. We just take the air gun and blow it out the door.
Real quick, Mark. Well, not real quick, but there's one last question that I really want to ask, and I already know the answer, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it while I had the opportunity. Has there ever once been one moment since you walked away you thought you missed racing, or you wish you could maybe jump back in a race car?
I had such a good career, and kind of went out on my own terms, and the answer is no. When I walked away from racing, I'd had my fill of it. My kids were getting older. I was missing time with the family, and I don't regret anything. Life, like I said, life after racing is good.
And that was the exact answer I was expecting. But like I said, I would always wonder if I didn't have the opportunity to ask you today. So one other thing I want to talk about real quick, and then we're going to let you guys get going. Mark, it's probably past your bedtime. You know, you better get up and mow the grass in the morning. I understand that, but but you guys rebuild these cars, and I want you to tell me just a little bit about some of your most unique jobs that you guys have done, and how do you find your customers? Do you do these for yourselves, or are these for other people, or tell us a little bit about the restoration deal that you guys have?
Well, it kind of come about. I got to restoring Indian motorcycles, and of course, Dad has got several old cars that he's done frame off, frame up, and of course, with his reputation, people just started coming to us, and I've sent you some pictures, and that's just a fraction. But we've done a couple of Studebakers. We've done, oh my God, I don't know how many Ford Thunderbirds. Um, and just the list goes on and on and on. Buicks, 54 Buicks, kind of like you see in Rain Man and stuff like that. We keep very busy. We've got a 39 Century Buick in the shop now. And but everything goes good, and I'm going to have to put my CarQuest hat on back. But cars that I go to CarQuest.
I can tell.
At my local CarQuest store, and I'm telling you, for real, no plug for Donny. Our CarQuest is not no rock off. You don't get some kid in there that if he can't find it on the computer, you just might as well walk out. At my mall's CarQuest, we go there all the time, 100% real deal. Those guys know what they got. They found us an oil filter for a 1936 Chrysler Airflow. Have either one of you guys even seen a 1936 Chrysler
No.
Airflow?
No, I haven't.
They found us an oil filter for that mofo.
Were you surprised, honestly, when you went there, or were you like, yeah, they'll find it?
I'm telling you, the CarQuest we go to, they've got a kitchen sink above the counter. Because they'll find you everything but the kitchen sink. It's no Rock Auto or something you poke in. Yeah, this is where I got that at Miles. CarQuest.
Do you have your own personal rebuilt vehicle that you take pride in? That's your own personal one?
I have the I think I sent you a picture of the 46 Indian sidecar.
Yep, and I'll get a picture of that up later on here.
I built that, and it was rough. I should send you a picture of it before I started. It was rough, and I got a 55 Chevy that I've owned since high school. Dad has got numerous cars. But there's one thing I want to ask. I don't want to change the subject, but one thing I want to ask before I get off there, and this I'm going with Donny. Because it's a subject that we've never talked about before.
It's all you.
Okay. We were at Twin Lakes, Louisiana, St. Charles, and it was margarita night. In my day, I make a pretty good margarita. And we haven't got a bite all night long. And Donny went to his motorhome, and I'm reeling stuff in, and I catch this creature. To this day, I don't know what the heck this damn thing is. It wasn't an alligator. It wasn't a gar, but it was about about half as tall as I am. Skidding and hissing. Oh, it was. And it's about 2:30 in the morning, and I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do with this thing? A dummy light went off. Well, I'm going to go and knock on Donny Schatz door until he opens. I'm knocking on it. I'm kicking on it. I'm beating on it. Finally, he opens his step well to his motorhome. And I said, Donny, what do you think about that? I swear to God, he done a double somersault backwards. Door shut. My hand would have been in there. He would have cut it off. And me and that creature went back to the lake alive. And today, me and Donny has never said it. What was that, Donny?
I don't know what it was, but I do remember the time that we left Billings and we were headed towards the west coast at Skagit, and we spent the night at a campground right on the water, right off the interstate, somewhere there. And we were fishing, and you could catch anything. I couldn't even catch a cold in 35 below weather. I catch a fish, and I was so excited. I kept that thing out of the water on the hook for the longest time, and well, we were going to throw it back. We weren't going to keep it needed. So next thing you know, I kept it out so long, this thing's dead, and I'm like, well, now what are we going to do with it? And Mark goes, well, if you slap it up alongside the head, it'll come back to life. So I took it off the hook, and we slapped it up alongside the head. I laid it in the water, and it just laid there upside down. He pissed himself laughing for about 15 minutes because he thought I was gold on him. But I think that was another one of them margarita nights, to be real honest with you. It worked. But look, we got thousands of stories we could tell Lynn, but we'll give you a few of them.
Oh, I love it. Hey, Mark, did Donnie buy a special lure one time?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, the whole store probably.
Yeah, we was at remarkably they would come back and sponsor me. We was at a Bass Pro Shop when all this first started out, and I was over there getting some bobbers, some hooks, and kind of like a cane pole or something. And I see Donnie over there, and the rich guy here, and he said, "Reel that's about $150." And this lure, the lure was $75. And it was all sparkly and pretty and looked really nice. I said, Donnie, you're not going to need any of that. You're just going to have to need to buy me a 6-pack of beer. That's all we need when we go fishing. We're not going to need it. And throughout the year, we did not need it. And I think it was one of the last times me and Donnie went fishing. We was going from Fargo. It might have been even the time I got that when I plowed Tower in the butt, and we were going to Cottage Grove. And we stopped along another pristine river. I wasn't catching anything, nothing at all. And I knew it was so bad. And I could see the salmon go by. I was trying to hook them in the gill or something. And then about the time the sun was going down, here comes Donnie with this beautiful lure. And he catches the most beautiful salmon I've ever seen in my life. And it was a big one. It was about 3.5 foot long.
Are you with us, Don? Yeah, you're good. So anyway, Don. Hey, yeah, Mark, can you hear Don?
Yeah, everything's going on my end.
No, now he's gone. He'll be back. But I am going to have a little fun with it if he does make it back in.
All right, now you got me.
Hey, Don.
Sorry about that.
Hey, no,
sorry.
I just think it's hilarious that we were talking about the guy over on the rich section of town there with his lure, and Mark Kinser, who's got a flip phone, has stayed connected with us all night long with no technical issues, and Don, with every electrical gadget in the world, can't stay hooked up.
That's how it works. Yeah, you know how it works, Lan.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was showing you something. Are we about to wrap up?
No, you know what? We can go all night long.
I just want to show you my total high tech thing here.
Yeah, get it out. Let's see what you got.
Well, I've got my producer here, Patty.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's working with Tom Hanks. Chuck Norris. She's the best.
Yeah.
And come here, sweetheart. Show us this. Don't show us. Don't show how we got this set up. This is how we got this set up.
Oh, the setup.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Hold on.
Oh yeah.
It works
Yeah,
out.
You know what?
It's on a bird feeder box with a skull can, with another skull can on top of a cell phone holder.
Well, I'm telling you what, it was perfect, and look at.
I'm telling you, Donnie Ray, get your ass together.
I would have never guessed the skull can, honestly.
2 of them, bro.
Two of them. Perfect spacing.
That's
Look at
awesome.
that. And don't tell me I'm not with the world. I got my LGBTQ colors here behind me. I don't want to be, I don't want to be left out like that in life. Things are changing. I'm okay.
You don't have to change that far.
Yeah, don't change that far on us, Mark.
Well, I'm just saying, look at it.
So, speaking of cell phones, Mark, actually, is there a while you didn't have a cell phone?
I was totally against the cell phone.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why, because even today, it's absolutely totaled our youth.
It's done
No
more than
argument
that.
here. Yep, no argument here.
I mean, the kids nowadays, and even older people like me, you go to a restaurant and it's a $200 a plate, and there's two people sitting across each other pecking on their cell phone.
Yeah.
Not being the producer.
No.
No, she'll put my phone right in the birdseed box.
Well, and we want to thank the producer for letting you borrow her phone so we were able to get you connected tonight, too.
Well, not only that, she had a dinner engagement that she was supposed to film with George Clooney. She canceled that.
Well, I'm sure she'll have got more offers coming in pretty quick.
It's daily. It's every day.
Yeah. I still think Don needs to come down there and take you guys out for dinner. Maybe I'll ride
telling you.
along.
He's going to have to
Absolutely.
stop that super jet, and come on down.
Mark, I appreciate you very much for taking some time out of your life. And I know that the podcast thing, the electronics thing, isn't your gig, but I really do appreciate you opening up with us a little bit about what you've done since you stepped away from the racetrack, some of your stories, why you were out racing, some comparisons, sharing time about, you and Steve and Carl, and just having a good old time with us here tonight. It means a lot to me, and I want to thank Don for getting us all together to get this opportunity. I forgot Don busted on me pretty hard when we first came on the show about me being out of laundry, and I forgot to tell him there was a moral to the jersey. I thought since it was Old Timers Night that I'd dig out my John Elway jersey. But I got to include myself in there because, listen, Mark, I was out there running around with you guys, and one guy you forgot was Tubi. That we were messing your mechanics.
Yes,
and
I was trying to think of yes.
Yeah, and because him and Todd Seitz were out when I was out, and I always
Todd
Yep.
worked with me too.
Yep.
Yes.
Tubi should be in the Hall of Fame.
he did a lot of stuff for you and kept you guys rolling up and down the road.
Rick Ferkel. I mean, he was a nail with Rick Ferkel.
Yep.
Yeah, he'd been around a long time. I mean, I remember one time when the very first time I went to California, the very first time I met Tubi, I don't know if you ever seen him then, but it looked like he had a tube around his belly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they called him Tubi. And he got, and that's the old West Capitol racetrack. John Padgett paid him to go out and whitewash the whole track.
Oh, really?
Fence.
Yeah.
Yes, for real. And he went there with Rick Ferkel, and he got paid. And Tubi was happy with his pay, and Rick made him go buy a pair of shoes because the shoes were so wore out. And Tubi said, "Well, I wouldn't have done all that work for a pair of shoes." That's a true story.
And I can tell you that, and this is a little side note that it'll probably make you go, what? But 1994 was the year you were driving, I know, the Merrill 5M. Tubi and Todd were out with you. The reason I remember that is I drove down with my good friend who is now the promoter over at Houston Speedway named Doug Johnson. We drove down to Devil's Bowl. It was a 2-day show at Devil's Bowl, and I was looking for a job to go out with the World of Outlaws. And I told Doug the one guy I want to go out there with is Mark Kinser.
Okay.
And I talked to Todd because I'd known him from Houston Speedway before he came out with you. And I was like, man, if there's, and I ended up getting a job with Eldon, with Jack Hodenschild and Russ Ray.
Okay.
Russ was the crew chief, and he didn't make it through the year. That's when Dennis came in and took over for him in the spring. Yeah. But so I got to know Russ and Kay Earls. We spent a lot of time at Thank you. That's enough. Yeah, so that ages me. So when I say old timers, that puts you right where I'm at.
I hear you.
Yeah. So, but again, thanks again, Don. Thanks for jumping in and sharing some stuff with you and Mark. We could probably sit here and talk for hours, and people would be like, "What are they talking about?" But it was good getting caught up.
You might have to do some editing.
Yeah, by then exactly too. With that, we're gonna cut out of here. Mark, we won't bug you again for another. Let's see, what's it been? 22 years since you've been out. I'll try to get you in another 22 years and see what things are shaking out there. But thanks again for your time. Don, thank you
no
also.
Problem. You in this area, when I'm about 86, I'll give you a motorcycle ride.
Well, absolutely, and that'll be fun. So, once again, thanks, guys. Don?
Thank you, Mark. I needed a dose of the old Mark
I miss you,
Kinser.
brother. Yeah,
You too.
Good boy right there, that Donny Ray. He don't do nothing half-assed. He does not do nothing half-assed.
I'm glad you see this still the Mark Kinser I remember. That makes me feel good.
Right on, man. You have a good one, brother.
Well, hang
All
on.
right,
I
you two
got
guys.
one last story now. I got to tell. I got one last.
This is your fourth last story,
I know it,
so
but
get it in there.
but you know what? And you're so right. But Don got me your cell phone number to get hooked up with you.
Right on.
And then I finally got a hold of you, and we did the test session for the podcast. And I called Don as soon as we hung up. I'm like, Don, Mark looks the same today as the way I remember him the last time I saw him at a racetrack. And I know it wasn't in Peevely when you called her a career, but Mark, I'm very sincere when I say you have aged very well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and can't say the same for myself, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else.
I
so.
can't either, but yeah, I'm glad you haven't lost a step, Mark. Probably
thank you. There's a secret. There's a secret to longevity, but we can't say it right here on the podcast.
it's get away from racing. Is that what you're? That's probably part of it.
That might be step number one.
That's
Step number one.
yeah. And you can't get to step 2 without step 1. So, yeah, man, this is great. I glad we could do this, and when I'm gonna go out of my way to make sure I get down and visit you. It's a shame. I'm honestly embarrassed right now to sit here and say it's been 20 years since.
Damn shame, Donnie.
It is 20 years. Yeah, I know. And nobody has to tell you what takes priority in your life when all you want to do is win races. But I don't do that anymore, so I can focus on the other things. So
you'll get it turned around, Donnie.
Hey, I'm a field filler at the moment, so it is what it is. But
I'm betting
anyway,
on you in Knoxville. You'll get it figured out.
Yeah. Man, I had a blast, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, one big group hug, and then we're out, guys. All right.
There we go.
See you later. Thanks, boys.
See ya.
Yeah, bye.
Right on.
Okay, gang. So with that, talk about two great legends getting together and telling some great stories. Thanks, Mark, for sharing a lot of your history with us. It was great getting to hear back from you. You know, you walked away. And many of you fans out there, many of you younger ones out there might not even know who Mark Kinser is, but he was definitely a big part of the World of Outlaws sprint car racing. Was a huge name at the time, and even though he had to follow along with the ranks of Steve, Mark Kinser definitely won his share of races and helped grow the sport just as much as anybody else. So enjoyed getting to share that with you all tonight. If you enjoyed what you saw, I'm going to ask you guys once again, follow me on my social media pages. Not only follow, but subscribe, share my stuff. It all helps, and the goal is to get as many followers out there as I can and trying to help grow this thing a little bit. And I'm having a lot of fun getting to dig back into the old history of some of our drivers, some of our current drivers, and we're going to do some more of that stuff as we move forward. So thanks again, everybody, for joining in. I know we've missed a couple weeks. I've been working a temporary job, like I said earlier in the show, but we're going to get caught back up to things and get back to a weekly basis here real soon. So thanks, everybody, again. We'll see you real soon.